right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Martel, and I humbly serve as the Director of Advocacy for Achievement First.
Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Jacqueline Martel y yo estoy sirviéndole a todos aquí para la escuela Achievement First, Logro Primero.
Just as a friendly reminder, tonight's event will have live Spanish translation.
Solo para recordarle, esta noche vamos a tener interpretación en vivo.
If you need translation, please select the interpretation globe icon on the bottom of the screen.
Y si usted necesita traducción esta noche, solo debe de presionar el globito que dice traducción en la pantalla.
And for all of my speakers and presenters, please pause at regular intervals to allow for time for translation in the translation room.
Y para todos mis invitados esta noche, permítanle un poco de pausa para que así pueda hacer la transición intermitente de una traducción a la otra.
So we're going to turn translation on, and Narda is going to go into the translation room now.
Y Narda va ahora a ir a la habitación, al cuarto de traducción.
Great. And Anita, you can activate that. We are so excited to have so much parent and family power in the Zoom room tonight, and can't wait to have you hear directly from our mayoral candidates about their vision and plans for education, equity, and beyond. Shout out to all of the parents and families who submitted questions for the candidates in advance. Before we get started, let's see who's in the room. Take a minute to drop your school name, your borough, which neighborhood you're representing in the chat. Want to give a few shout outs. I know we should have some Democracy Prep folks, some AF folks, some Coney Island Prep folks. So we're excited to have everybody in the room today, and we can't wait to hear all of the questions that you helped us to curate. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Rich Bury, CEO of Achievement First, for a few opening words. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Jackie. Hi, everybody. And I see Commissioner Garcia is here. I'm going to be quick so we can get to it. Hi, Commissioner. Great to see you.
Good to see you.
Good evening, everyone. Achievement First, along with Democracy Prep and Civic Builders, are proud co-hosts of tonight's discussion. Achievement First was founded to address the legacy of racism in public education and to support the young people in our communities as they realize their power and their potential. We are so proud to co-host this forum centered on educational equity because students, families, and educators in our communities need and deserve the chance to ask our mayoral candidates where they stand on these key issues. And so I do want to thank Catherine Garcia and our other guests who we'll introduce later who were able to join us tonight. We had hundreds of people sign up for tonight's event, including, and I see people are still logging on, including families and staff from quite a number of charter schools and educational organizations around the city. These include places like Achievement First, Classical Charter Schools, the Coalition of Community Charter Schools, Coney Island Prep, Democracy Prep, Dream Charter School, High Leadership Charter School in the Bronx, KIPP NYC, the New York Charter School Association, Public Prep, the American Dream School, and Common Schools, and Zeta Charter Schools. It's so good to have so many parents, school leaders, and team members, as well as families and community members coming together to join this important conversation. And let's remember to show that power by showing up at the polls in just under a month. And now it is my honor to introduce one of our co-organizers, Natasha Trivers.
Thank you, Rich. Good evening, everyone. My name is Natasha Trivers, and I'm the CEO of Democracy Prep Public Schools. As Rich said, we are so thankful for everyone joining us this evening, and we have a great program planned. Before we get started, I just want to shout out Carrie Barnes, who is a board member for Democracy Prep New York, and Civic Builders for helping to bring this coalition together to make this event possible. I also want to thank the candidates who are joining us tonight. We are so pleased to have 3 leading mayoral candidates participating in tonight's conversation. In order of their appearance, we'll meet Catherine Garcia, Ray McGuire, and Andrew Yang. We are grateful to each of these candidates for all they do for New York City and for agreeing to come tonight to speak about educational equity in our great city. And I'm happy to pass the mic now to David.
Thanks, Natasha, and good evening, everyone. My name is David Umansky, and I'm the CEO of Civic Builders, a nonprofit that supports public charter schools here in New York City and nationwide. Our focus is on the school buildings. We help great charter schools build and finance their buildings. We're excited to be in conversation this evening with these leading mayoral candidates and with our community. Our next job for the evening is, my next job for the evening is to introduce our host, Miles Miller. Before I do that, though, I want to take a brief moment to thank Ellen McBurney on my team, who, along with our other partners at Achievement First and Democracy Prep, worked tirelessly to make tonight's event possible. Now on to my real job, introducing Miles. Miles is an Emmy Award-winning journalist who covers crime, the courts, and general assignment for WNBC TV. He joined NBC's flagship station in 2019. Previously, he was the deputy press secretary for the fire department of New York City and White House correspondent for The Daily. He's a member of Investigative Reporters and Editors, the National Association of Black Journalists, the New York Press Club, the National Forensic League, and perhaps most impressively of all, though, he's a graduate of Bronx Prep Charter School, a school in the Democracy Prep Network. Please join me in welcoming Miles Miller.
Hi, everyone. So good to be able to join all of you tonight and to be able to share in a robust discussion here. I'm going to speak slowly so that those who are paying attention and listening in Spanish are able to participate in that way as well. I went to Bronx Prep Charter School. I went there because of some of the issues that we're talking about tonight, right? Equity and being able to find good educational options in my neighborhood. My zone school wasn't a great school, and so I transitioned to Bronx Prep, which was independent at that point and is now part of the Democracy Prep Network. And then from Bronx Prep, I went to a city public school where I finished for high school. And so this is all really important. And the conversation around equity is so important. And it's great that we can have this discussion with three leading candidates for mayor. And so just to go over sort of how this will all work, there will be three questions for the candidates that are crowdsourced from parents, and then you guys have 5 minutes to answer each one. So I guess in this respect, we'll talk directly to you, Catherine Garcia, because you're the only one who is joining us at this moment. And then if you go over, I'll kindly prompt you to move on to the next question. We've done one of these before together, and we had a good time. So we know how to make these things move along. We'll have a queue for folks who have questions. You can put it in the Q&A section, and then we can try to get to those as well. But to introduce Catherine Garcia, a person you may have heard of in the New York Times, which recently endorsed her, as well as in the Daily News, someone I know from covering city government. Catherine Garcia always had her phone on during snowstorms and blizzards, and anytime there was a big cleanup, she always answered the phone and was able to do an interview. So we thank her for that. But Catherine Garcia, of course, is a lifelong New Yorker, a former commissioner for the Department of Sanitation, who made sure that your streets were clean and that your trash was picked up. She led the world's largest municipal waste management program at the Sanitation Department, which includes recycling, street cleaning, and snow response. She is a former interim chair and CEO of NYCHA, which, of course, if in the Democracy Prep Network, as well as Achievement First Network, and for a lot of the people who are on this webinar, a lot of the students live in NYCHA. And she was the COO of the Department of Environmental Protection. She's overseen some of the most ambitious projects and reforms in New York City, most recently helping out with the food distribution program for so many families who needed it most in New York. Let me go a little bit slower because, of course, it's being translated in real time. Catherine's running for mayor of New York City. She wants to bring the experience and leadership necessary to deliver strong services that will improve the everyday lives of New Yorkers and build a more sustainable and equitable future for all of New Yorkers, including the most important New Yorkers, the students who attend the schools, being focused on here today. So with that, I will introduce Catherine Garcia to talk to all of you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And yes, I did always answer my phone and set up time to meet with reporters because you were the ones who were going to get the message out that we needed to get out to the public. So I always appreciated your role in that, even though sometimes quite hard hitting. But we were ready for it. I am running because I believe that we need to have a city that is thriving, where we have an economy that is growing, and that we have real economic opportunity for every kid, which means we have to have education that is equally demanding of every child so that they are ready for the 21st century. And that means investment. And that means making sure that we stop having this conversation that if this is a scarce resource, and start having a conversation about how we can support every kid. This is going to be particularly important going into this fall, where we know there's been a tremendous amount of trauma. We know there's been a tremendous amount of learning loss, and we're going to all have to work together to support these kids. I want to see that economy grow, but we have to have a more livable, more affordable city so that people want to stay here, people want to come here, and people want to visit here. And we see that economic activity happen, but it won't happen if you don't get the fundamentals right. People need to feel safe in their communities, regardless of the color of their skin. They need their kids back in school. They need their streets clean. And I have a real vision for how we can do this, how we can make all of these interlocking crises actually be solved and stop bandaging programs and really get to the heart of what's holding us back. We're going to have to do a lot of stuff, walk and chew gum, but that's what I've been known for, being able to solve the hard problems in a radical thought that government will actually work for everyone equally.
All right, so let's get to our first question. This webinar obviously has many public charter school families on it and supporters on the line. Talk about your educational vision for the city and how charters fit into it. So many times people run for office and are asked this question. And then when they get into office, we don't hear the focus on charters. What's the focus on charters? What would be the focus on charters in your administration?
So charters are a part of our ecosystem. They are educating over 100,000 kids in New York City. And to be quite honest with you, I don't care if the kid is going to a Catholic school or a yeshiva or a charter school or public school. I want them to have the best education. I want them to have the most resources to make sure that they can thrive. And we have opportunities to learn from each other. What is working in the charter school? That can be an experimental platform for something that we need to do in the public sector, and vice versa. But it is about having an ongoing dialogue with charter schools, because you're educating a lot of New York City kids right now. And it's the kids who have almost usually the least choice in where they get to go. And everyone should have choice about where they want to go and have the ability to thrive in that school community.
So I'm seeing you as saying that there's a big opportunity to learn from charters as the big focus of how charters would play in the Garcia administration.
Yeah, what are the tools that you're doing that is successful, and what do we need to do to be as successful in some of our schools? Are you creating more relationships with the parents in that particular school? Is that really been the key? And it will be different in every school, but we need to have all the tools in the toolbox so that these kids are getting educated.
You played a big role in the city's response to COVID. Can you speak to the impact that COVID's had on New York City students and schools? And as mayor, how do you come up with a plan that really reduces the amount of learning loss we've seen this year?
The last year in the public schools have just been, failure after failure in some respects. I mean, I know teachers and principals are doing yeoman's work, but not getting great direction from headquarters, from Tweed, and the 2-case open close, regardless of whether or not you had a school of 100 kids or a school of 3,000 kids, just made no sense. Kids need to be back in their classrooms. They should be back in their classrooms now. And the littlest ones, when we knew that they were not super spreaders, should have been getting back in their classrooms earlier. But now with the vaccines, we should be thinking about how do we focus on those kids and get them back. It's a lot of trauma. They need art and music and sports and theater in every school, so that we give them a real reason to come back and to feel embraced by that community. But I really feel that with charters being in that equation of like what we're going to do, making sure that we're doing and giving kids tutoring, we're going to have to look at every kid individually to figure out where they are. How much have they lost? Did they miss out on math? Did they miss out on reading? Where are they in the whole spectrum from, they actually did okay to they really, really, really are behind, and giving them intensive services, tutoring services to bring them up to speed, and making sure that we are doing those interventions and checking on those interventions constantly during the year, not just waiting till the end of the year to find out whether or not it worked, because we're going to have to be agile. And this is another place where we can learn from each other. No one has a playbook right now on how do you catch a kid up who spent a year on Zoom and may have tremendous learning loss. We need to have a plan, but we need to be able to be adaptive if something's not working and make a change.
One issue that's very important, a question that comes from parents, is about having access to quality schools in their neighborhoods. And that, of course, requires raising the charter cap. There are obviously a ton of like-minded educators who are thinking about creating charter schools, who have created them and done all the work and are really relying on the charter cap to be raised. Where do you stand on that issue? And how would you see the charter cap issue being raised in your administration?
So I do support raising the charter cap because I want every kid to have the opportunity, and I want every adult who's thinking creatively about how to do education well, to have the opportunity to do that. I mean, I wish that we had great public schools in every neighborhood today, but I'm not willing to wait until we get there for the kids who are in school right now.
I think the James Merriman said it. That the charter cap is basically arbitrary. Do you find that that's the case? I mean, it's something that's been bandied back and forth.
I mean, I find it a political football, if that's what you're asking, and not particularly helpful to kids.
Let's talk about transportation, which is a key issue in terms of how students in the charter school network are able to get to school. A lot have no school bus choice. What's the way that you would propose, someone who understands routes and was able to move a system of sanitation trucks? How do you get kids to and from school specifically in this network?
Yeah, there's actually straight off the shelf software that you can use to route school buses today. It's not even that complicated to do, and make it more efficient so kids don't end up being on a bus for excessive lengths of time. And also to make it so that the easiest ways is you can cluster and do neighborhood runs. Everyone meet on this corner rather than door to door. That's also been very effective.
I'm going to go to one of these Q&A questions here. The question is, I'm a parent of 2 young girls attending a charter school in Bedford-Stuyvesant. I'm grateful that they have the opportunity to receive an education I feel is best for them. However, I feel we are not supported by our local and city leaders when it comes to charter schools. How can you provide some sense of security to our fellow parents when it comes to new legislation?
Hey, look, I'm going to stand up for you in the same way that I stand up for the things that I have believed in. And that is also making sure that we're working collaboratively with charter schools, figuring out how to make it so that they're successful and that the public schools are successful as well. I mean, I know I got to do both at the same time. And I think that's completely possible. But because you're a charter school does not mean that I think that you're it's become too political. Like that you're not pure enough on this or that. And I just don't feel that way.
We're going to transition. We're going to transition in 1 second to Rank the Vote NYC, and they'll get into how that all works. But before you do that, Did you send your kids to a charter school or a public school?
I sent them to a public school and then an independent school.
And just quickly, why, school choice is so important. Why did you make that decision?
Well, it was easy to go to my local elementary school. It was a great school. I actually went to that as well. I was an alum. And then it was, as a working mom, it was just easier for me to have them in a place where they also had after school until 6 o'clock, and made it so I didn't have to think about that. And they made lunch.
As we know, as us charter people know, school runs late. I was in enrichment till 6 o'clock every day, so I enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I will also disclose that my niece is currently at a charter school. So
okay, at least she gets some props, I guess. Thank you. We're going to transition to rank the vote, but thank you for answering these questions, and I think it gives a lot of perspective to a lot of parents who are looking for some options as it relates to their students, and also as it relates to how they're going to vote in just a couple of weeks. So to transition to Rank the Vote, it was founded in 2019 to bring ranked choice voting to New York City. After their historic win, they have shifted to educating voters, candidates, and campaigns, as well as community groups on the upcoming changes to our local elections. Another reminder that if you have any questions, of course, you can use the Q&A function. I was able to take a question from there that was a really interesting question to ask. And then everybody who is manning the chats will try to get to them shortly. So without further ado, I think we'll go to rank the vote. Is that correct? What we want to do? Yeah? Okay, cool. Sean, go ahead.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Digar. I'm the Education Campaign Program Director for Rank the Vote NYC. I hail from the Bay Area of California, where for the last decade, I've been running ranked choice candidate campaigns, conducting ranked choice voting education campaigns, and traveling the country, sharing my experiences with ranked choice voting and advocating on its behalf. So with that, we're going to get started with our presentation. As was mentioned, feel free to include in Q&A any questions you may have. So we're going to start off with a quick recap of the changes coming to local elections and how we got here. Now, some of you all may remember in 2009, there was a costly, low turnout runoff election held for public advocate and comptroller, which prompted a debate over the use of runoff elections. In that election, the city spent $20 million and only 250,000 voters showed up citywide. So in 2010, then Council Member Gail Brewer introduced the first ranked choice voting legislation. In 2010, and again in 2018, charter revision commissions met, which explored changes to the city's constitution, which is essentially its constitution. And so those two commissions met. That 2018 commission held dozens of public hearings and heard from hundreds and hundreds of community members and organizations about the need for ranked choice voting in local elections. So that same 2018 commission voted 14-1 to place what became question 1 on the November 2019 ballot. And voters overwhelmingly passed it with nearly 75% of the vote. So now we're having our first ranked choice elections. So why ranked choice voting and why now? The city recently implemented term limits for council members, which has led to 32 open council seats in this election. Those 32 open council seats, along with the robust campaign finance system that the city offers, has led to a wealth of diverse candidates. But under the previous system, those candidates would have risked splitting the vote and someone being elected who doesn't represent the diversity of New York City and of its districts. Also under the previous system, a council member could be elected with as little as 20% of the vote. That means that 80% of voters voted for someone else and did not have their voice heard in the final results of that election. That's bad for democracy, and that's bad for governing. So ranked choice voting fixes that. So what's changing? Starting this year, all local, primary, and special elections for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council will be ranked choice voting elections. That means that you now have the option to rank your top 5 candidates in each of those races, including a write-in if you so choose. It also means that runoffs are eliminated and a candidate will need at least 50% plus 1 of the vote in order to win. So some dates to remember. The June primary is on Tuesday, June 22nd. Your last day to register to vote is May 28th. The last day to change your address, if you're already registered, is June 2nd. Early voting runs from a very, very, very special date, a date I hope you all have on your calendar. It's Saturday, June 12th. It's my birthday. So in lieu of gifts and money, I might still take money, but in lieu of gifts, you can go and vote early on Saturday, June 12th, and that runs through Sunday, June 20th. I am posting some links in the chat right now that include where you can register to vote, where you can request your absentee ballot, and where you can find your early voting location. So how do you think about your rankings? We like to say that your first choice is the candidate you love. It's the candidate you may volunteer for or contribute to, but at the very least, it's the person that you're talking to your friends, your family, and your neighbors about. It's the person who's from your community, who shares your values and shares your positions on issues. Similarly, your second choice is someone you like. It's someone who still shares your values and your positions on issues, but they may not be from your community. Your third and your fourth choices are people who aren't necessarily there with you on all your values, may not share all of your positions on issues, but still overwhelmingly have that in common with you. Your fifth choice is the candidate in the past you may have had to hold your nose to vote for, the candidate you may consider to be the lesser of evils, but they're definitely someone you don't dislike. Because in any election, no matter what, never vote for someone you do not like. So your fifth choice is someone who isn't your favorite, but you think will still do a good job and is better than the other candidates in the race that you are not ranking. So we're going to go into a quick video that talks a little bit more about ranked choice voting.
Hi, I'm Mahir, and welcome to my bodega. As you may know, New York City has a new way to vote in special and primary elections. So, how does ranked choice voting work? The next time you vote in a city election, instead of choosing just one candidate, you can rank them all from your first choice to your fifth. Here's how it works. Let's say my bodega is picking its featured snack of the month. So many choices. Which one should I feature? This customer ranks Parker Pretzels as her top favorite. She also ranks her second choice, Mr. Chips, third choice, Chi-Chi Chicharrones, fourth choice, Gladys Gummies, and fifth choice, Poppy Popcorn. Other customers rank their choices as well. If Parker Pretzels is the favorite choice and wins more than 50% of all the first ranked choices, then Parker Pretzels is the winner and is featured as the snack of the month. However, if no snack gets more than 50%, then the least popular snack is eliminated. Sorry, Figgy Bars. The remaining second-ranked choices from customers who chose Figgy Bars are redistributed. So if customers chose chips and chicharrones as second choices, then those two snacks receive additional votes. The new totals are counted and the process repeats until there's a winner of the final two. Congrats, Poppy Popcorn, you're the bodega snack favorite. Back in the real world, before it's time to vote for humans, visit rankthevotenyc.org for more information. Thank you, New York City, for voting and for making these special and primary elections your elections.
All right. So we're going to keep going. And again, feel free to type any questions you have in the Q&A box. So this is an example of what your ballot is likely to look like, actually will look like. Here you see 4 races on one page. You see mayor, public advocate, comptroller, and council member. Now, because there are so many candidates for mayor and so many candidates for comptroller, your ballot will be double-sided. So the races for mayor, public advocate, and comptroller will be on the front, and then on the back will be borough president and council member. So you will need to flip over your ballot in order to continue your rankings. And so here, the candidates, you see the candidates are in rows and your choices are in columns. So you will go column by column, picking your first choice, your second choice, your third choice, and so on. Let's talk about the counting. So the counting only kicks in if no candidate receives 50% plus 1 of first choice votes. Under existing state law, the winner will not be declared until all votes are counted. And that includes early votes, election day votes, absentee votes, and affidavits. So existing state law says that the Board of Elections cannot start counting absentee ballots until 7 days after the election to make sure they receive them all in the mail. Similarly, the Board of Elections is not able to open military and overseas ballots until 13 days after election day. On top of that, there is a period of time in which anyone who mails in their ballot and makes a mistake on their envelope, maybe they forget to sign it or date it, has a window of time in which they can fix that mistake and ensure that their vote is counted. So that takes us up to about 3 weeks. After that, the counting process under ranked choice voting is simply hitting the button on the keyboard. So it takes no more than 30 seconds and doesn't add any time to the counting process. Once that is complete, the round by round vote totals will be released to the public and we will have a winner. So why should you rank your ballot? We like to say it gives you more choice and more power. More choice because the more people you rank on your ballot, the longer you continue to have a say in the process and the longer your ballot works for you. More power because, as we're seeing tonight, ranked choice voting forces candidates to reach out to every single voter. No longer can they get elected by just a small block or small group of people. Even if your favorite candidate doesn't win, you still have a say in who's elected. You can vote your conscience without worrying that you're wasting your vote. And ranking a second, third, fourth, or fifth choice will never hurt your favorite candidate because your vote stays with them until they've already lost the race and been eliminated. So let's go through some frequently asked questions quickly. How many candidates do I rank? You can rank up to 5 or as few as you like. Do I have to use all 5 rankings? No. You can rank with just one candidate or a few. Can I rank a candidate more than once? This is important. It does not help your favorite candidate to rank them more than once. Why? Because your vote stays with that candidate until they've lost the race and been eliminated. So ranking them a second time is not some magical cure that will bring them back to life in the race. They've already lost the race and been defeated. It does hurt your opportunity to continue to have a say in the election because you're missing out on your chance to rank other candidates. Lastly, does it hurt my favorite candidate to have a second choice? Again, no. Your second, third, fourth, or fifth choice will not kick in unless your first choice has already lost the race and been eliminated. Now, what do you want to remember coming from this session this evening? Starting this year, New York City voters will have the option to rank their top 5 candidates in our local primary and special elections for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, borough president, and city council. If you want, you can still vote for just one candidate, or you can continue to have a say in the process and rank up to 5. Why should you rank your ballot? Because you don't have to worry about wasting your vote, accidentally helping to elect someone you don't support, splitting the vote, or someone being elected with less than a majority. Now that's it for the presentation. I know we're going to take Q&A, but this presentation, along with a bunch of other materials, are available in 13 different languages on our website, rankthevotenyc.org.
All right. Yeah, so let's go through the first question we got here. Give me 1 second, sorry. Pulling it up. The first question we've gotten here is, if I don't have a 5th candidate as a preference, can I leave it blank?
Absolutely. You do not have to vote for all 5, especially if you're looking at maybe a city council race where you don't have all that many candidates in the race. It is definitely up to you how many candidates that you rank.
You spoke about this a little bit during the presentation, but drive home the message about not voting for someone that you absolutely don't like, and what's the importance of that?
I mean, no matter what type of election it is, you never give a vote to someone you dislike. If you do, you're just helping them win. And so if you don't like them, you probably don't want them to win. So yes, definitely do not give a vote to someone you dislike.
Waiting for more questions here, but before we, as we sort of go through these, just drive home the message again about the important dates that people need to be reminded of. I forget them all the time, but just to go back through those.
Definitely. So the last day to register to vote is May 28th. The last day to change your address, if you're already registered, is June 2nd. Early voting runs from Saturday, June 12th through Sunday, June 20th. And election day is June 22nd.
Before we transition here, I want you to just drive home the message about why it's important for our families to get out and vote. I mean, it's such an important message. I think that when that comes from our communities and comes to our communities from within the community, it makes an important impact. So, drive the message home how it has a direct impact on public charter schools?
I mean, all politics is local. We like to think that things are fixed at the federal level or at the state level, but it's really your council member, your borough president, your mayor who makes the decisions of where the money goes, what the policies are. And you know, if your community is fixed up, if that pothole on your street remains there for the next 10 years. But I will add that this election is a milestone in the city. There is going to be a major shift in power at the council level, and there will be a major shift in power at the mayoral level. So it's important that all 208 people on this webinar right now are registered to vote and go and cast their ballot, and preferably ranked so that you can continue to have a say in the process as long as possible.
All right, thank you so much. We want to thank Rank the Vote for this presentation. Hopefully it was very impactful and helpful for families who are looking to figure out how to bring this all together. Now I want to bring up Leslie Bernard-Joseph, the CEO of Coney Island Prep, and talk a little bit about what we've heard so far and, you know, how this all relates to some of our families. So Leslie, good evening to you.
Miles, thanks so much for having me. So first, to introduce myself, my name is Leslie Bernard-Joseph. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Coney Island Prep. Coney Island Prep is a K-12 small network of public charter schools in Southern Brooklyn. We serve more than 1,000 families. So I am so excited to be here tonight because we are talking about choice. And like you, I think, Miles, I'm a product of school choice. I was born in Brooklyn, but I grew up in Queens in a single parent Haitian American household. And my mother had me zigzagging across the district trying to find the best schools for me. I was in my third New York City public school by the time I was in third grade and getting bused out of the district for middle school. So this is personal.
You know, one thing about a Caribbean parent, right? They're gonna make sure you go to a good school.
Listen, I think there was never safe for me to go to a family member, to a friend's house and spend the night, but it was definitely safe for me to walk 1.5 miles to take, you know, the city bus with the blue Metro car back in the day, or on a bus pass at 6 in the morning. So
you're dating yourself there.
Okay, well, I'm okay. I'm still technically a millennial. But I will say the thing that I definitely heard both from Sean and from Commissioner Garcia was just this importance of choice and the power that comes with choice. And I think for all of us here speaking about educational equity, whether we are charter school staff members, whether we're charter school parents, whether we are folks who graduated from those schools, it's just so incredibly powerful for us to have the decision-making rights in our hands about our future.
That's right. I want to bring in Rich Beery here too to join this discussion. Rich, you know, from what you've heard so far, whether it be from Commissioner Garcia or from the presentation we just seen, you know, your key takeaways and just joining in this discussion about this robust discussion about public charter schools that we often don't hear from our elected officials who are trying to run for the most important office in the city.
Well, thanks, Miles. And so much of what Leslie was just saying, what you said also resonates for me. I'm also a child of Caribbean immigrants. My family is from Panama. And we also benefited from school choice, but before charter schools were a thing. You know, for me, that looked like going to Catholic school for elementary school at St. Michael's in Brooklyn. And then middle school, I went to IS 383, Philippa Duke Scholar Middle School for the Gifted and Talented in Bushwick. And choice in the sense that I had to take a test, but a school that was served Black and Latino students. And then I went to high school at Stuyvesant, where I actually were the same class as Catherine Garcia, although we didn't know each other at the time. So, you know, for my family, my parents didn't choose our local schools. I grew up on Linden Boulevard in East New York, and my local schools were struggling. They had a history of poor performance, and my parents were able to help us figure out better options. And so fundamentally, that's what it's all about, like families having options if they're not happy with with what their neighborhood school might be. And so, you know, I think as you just heard from Commissioner Garcia, you know, the vote, you know, I sort of take away the power of everybody being here and exercising their voice and their rights. So if you want to continue to have the options for your children that you have now, if you want your neighbors and other family members to have those options, then it's important that you make your voice heard and make sure that our elected officials understand that there is a constituency of parents who want, are not really interested in the political battles. Not, you know, it's not about political battles, it's not about competition, it's not about something being better than something else. It's just that you as a parent want to be able to make choices for your kids. I make choices for my kids about where they go to school. And I don't see why that should be limited to me. I don't see why only middle-class families or wealthy families or families who can afford to move into different neighborhoods should have that choice. I just think all families should have that choice.
Natasha, bring you into the discussion here as well, what you've heard and, you know, what resonates with you.
Yeah, I'm just totally co-signing with Rich and with Leslie. I would also just from my own personal experience with my children, 2 of my children attend district public schools. 1 of them attended a charter school. And so even for me as a charter leader, I made different choices for 2 of my children versus my third. And that's the exact same power to choose that we want to make sure every parent has, regardless of socioeconomic status, regardless of zip code. I think it's really refreshing to hear Commissioner Garcia say that, like, it doesn't matter what type of school, and there shouldn't be political footballs. We really should be empowering school systems to serve all of our students, and I think funding follows that as well. That has to be equitable regardless of the school system as well. So refreshing conversation so far. Really looking forward to hearing from the other candidates.
It was interesting to you know, we usually don't hear directly from candidates about raising a charter cap, and that was really refreshing to see as well. Give me 1 second here. Let's look at some of these questions that people want answered. Among them, one of the last ones that popped up here was people are asking about endorsements and how we expect, like, people in my industry to rank. And obviously in the newspaper industry, they do a lot of endorsements, and some have started to use the 1 through 5 choices, but others just go directly for the candidate they like. And then some other questions we're seeing here are about the candidates and their platforms and where they can find that information. So I'd imagine we could figure out a way to make that available for about all the candidates, not just the ones who agreed to have this robust discussion. And then some questions we'll have for the next people who are joining us, including Ray and Andrew Yang, include how to unify district schools and public charter schools, which of course is something that comes up all the time. Let's keep this discussion going though. Talk about the journey that brought all of you to the public charter world. Obviously, Rich, I know you're from City Hall. And Natasha, you're at My School Network, which is incredible. And then, you know, Leslie, for you to be part of a network of schools in Southern Brooklyn that really needs the choice. Just take our families through the journey. Let's start with Leslie.
Appreciate the opportunity. So I talked a little bit about my mom to start. So I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, and Rosedale. And so for those of you who don't know how far Rosedale is, take the E to the end of the line, then get on the Q85, fall asleep on the bus, wake up again, get off the bus, and then walk a little bit more. And then you are getting close to where I live. So it's very much on the edge of Queens. I think that experience of growing up in a place that was so distant from the prosperity really of the city and the prominence of the city, I think gives you a little bit of edge to who you are growing up. I think I'm definitely an outer borough kid. But after tremendous opportunities, in part because of my mom, I left college and wanted to come back and give back and serve. And so I started off my career as a teacher. I started off teaching in the Bronx in a community that was very different than mine, but I loved it. I fell in love with kids and teaching kids and the energy that they have. And I fell in love with my community, and I fell in love with our parents. And that for me was just sort of it. I knew that I was going to be passionate about education, but not just because of education for education's sake, but because of the injustices that I saw growing up, the lack of opportunity that I saw growing up. I grew up in a district that was 99% Black. And in order for my mother to find great opportunities for me, I was bused out of district to a district that was, it looked very different than mine. It was 80% white and Asian. It was a lot more affluent. And it took a long time for me to understand why my neighborhood didn't have the resources that we thought my family needed for me to succeed, and why we had to go someplace else for that. And I think that is the reason, I know that's the reason why I ended up being drawn to Coney Island Prep. I was living in Harlem at the time. I was teaching in the Bronx, and I remember taking that first train ride down all the way to the last stop, Stillwell Avenue. And it felt like this was a different part of the city. This was a place that, for some reason, we had decided to forget, outside of Nathan's hot dog eating contest or the summer months in the amusement park district, that people live there, that there are incredible kids and families there who deserve just as much of a shot at the American dream. So I didn't want to live in a city where the only time you saw Manhattan was when you were standing on the subway platform in the cold. So that for me is why I'm at Coney Island Prep, and why I'm so excited about the amazing things that we're doing and about to do for our kids and families.
Leslie, where are your other schools? Coney Island Prep's the name, but where are the schools focused?
So we are a school that is in and about a place. So all of our schools are in District 21. Our flagship middle school is in Coney Island proper, just down the block from Lincoln High School. So if you remember He Got Game, it's that Lincoln. Our high school is in Gravesend, just 2 train stops away. And our elementary school, or I should say elementary schools, are in Bath Beach, right off the Bell Parkway.
And what do you guys do? Field trips to Spumoni Gardens, Randazzo's, all the good spots in town?
We've definitely been to Spumoni Gardens more time than my stomach would like to count, or certainly more time than I think my suit pants can afford for me to go. For sure.
I know that I think that the thing for me, having gone to a charter school, was that it opened my eyes to so many things that I would have never gotten at a traditional public school, whether it be speech and debate or traveling to different parts of the city. My first Broadway show, all thanks to having gone to Bronx Prep. Natasha, take us through your journey, how you got here, and why, how you sort of arrived at Democracy Prep.
Sure. So much of what Leslie was talking about resonated with me. So grew up in Hollis, Queens, and later Springfield Gardens when I was in college. That's where I came home to in the summers. So definitely the long train ride and bus line. Say that again?
Said 11314.
Absolutely. So I think for me, similar to Leslie, never really felt like I had access to the whole city, right? So the first time I went to like the Statue of Liberty or Central Park was when I was like an adult in my 30s, and people would be like, "You grew up in New York, and like that's the first time you walked through Central Park?" But that legit was my experience. Just some excellent like shining examples of teachers, but in really dysfunctional and unsafe schools was really my experience through K through 12. And I think when I went to college, I went to Rutgers, I was dead set on being a lawyer. I wanted to combat the overrepresentation of Black and Brown people in the criminal justice system. That was sort of like the battleground that I wanted to be on. The second job, like a close second, was to get a PhD in African American studies, right? So 2 very different career paths. Took the LSATs, was gonna go the lawyer path. And I started tutoring kids in New Brunswick, New Jersey in a program, an after school program. And I just, I fell in love with it. And I also realized on the 2 different other paths I could take, defending kids in the criminal justice system, young people who had gotten enmeshed in it far too early and too deeply, or becoming an Afro-American studies nerd, that teaching in the K through 12 system was where it was at, because what better way can you get at liberation and empowerment of communities of color and low-income communities than being on the front lines in the K through 12 education. And so that was just sort of a turning point for me.
I hear that. It looks like Ray is jumping on here, but yeah, no, and the two don't have to be mutually exclusive either, right? We need good lawyers, and we also need, we need good lawyers who understand African American studies, and we need people who understand African American studies to be running important networks as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I think he's jumping in on here shortly.
Hello.
There you are.
There
Yeah, the best setup of any, objectively, the best setup of any mayoral candidate. Ray McGuire is on the line. Hello, Ray.
How we doing, Miles? How you guys doing?
I think everybody's energized and excited to hear from you. There are a number of questions already in the queue.
Okay, what y'all got? I see the good and the great here. You got some great educators here.
Everybody here is energized to hear from you. Before we get to the questions, I'll introduce you a little bit here. Ray McGuire was raised by a single mother and his grandparents in Dayton, Ohio. Ray and his two brothers didn't have much growing up, but they had family, faith, church, and a loving home, as well as a deep-seated belief that education was their ticket to anywhere. And the campaign would like you to know that some New York City hip hop legends endorse Ray. They include Jay-Z, Diddy, Nas, and Steve Stout. Ray, please tell the people about your background, how you came to run for office, and tell our audience why they should know a little bit more about you.
So thank you for having me. For one, listen, I come to this having come out of the inner city, coming out of the neighborhood. As you said, my single mother raised me and my two brothers. I didn't know my dad, and along with my grandparents, they raised me and my two brothers and half a dozen foster siblings at any point in time. My mother's sacrifices, beginning in the 6th grade, is that which serves as my foundation. And it's all through education. I had to walk 3/4 of a mile to get to a corner where the bus would pick me up and take me to a school on which I had a scholarship and financial aid. I was there from 6th grade to 11th grade. 11th grade, I had an A average. I averaged 28 points per game playing basketball, and I was president of the school. Teacher there said, if you're as good as you say you are, go test yourself against the big girls and boys in the East. I took a Greyhound bus around New England by myself and led at a school in Connecticut where the kids had those short sleeve shirts with alligators, cost more than my entire wardrobe. I did well enough there. I applied to colleges, got in, was able to go on to Harvard College and then Harvard Law School and Harvard Business School. And so my mother's sacrifices was sometimes had to work 3 jobs. And then she became a social worker. I know what it's like not to have, and I know what opportunities education gave me. When I came to New York City, I had 3 things. I had a great education, I had a lot of debt, and I had no money. And the city's been great to me personally, and it's been great to me professionally. Personally is where I met my wife, Crystal. We have 3 kids. Leo, who is 8, Ella, who is 18, just got into college of her choice, which is Harvard, we're proud to say. And Cole, who's 20, now 21, drafted first round into the NBA, now the starting point guard for the Orlando Magic. So it's been great to me personally, and professionally it's been great because I came into the world called finance, where 1 or 2 people look like me, and I was able to climb the ladder and able to get to a level where I was able to manage through conscious and unconscious bias. And while I got to that point in managing large budgets, I also made certain that I extended the ladder to others. And I've created more opportunity and more jobs and got more people trained and promoted and compensated and created more wealth than all the other mayoral candidates combined. I come to this point in time where my lived experiences and what I've been able to do through education, when the city's in a crisis of COVID, crisis of the economy, crisis of safety, and crisis of education. I love this city because it's given me everything. And this city needs a leader in whom it can believe and trust, who's got a track record, who's got receipts. And so my vision is the economy, safety and justice, and education. A little about who I am, a little about what I've done, a little bit about my vision for the city that I love. And so I transitioned out of my day job to do this because this city needs something different. Because the same old, we've gone backwards in education. We've gone backwards in the economy. We've gone backwards in healthcare, and the city's become too afford to. You can't afford it, and it's become too. It's not safe.
All right, let's talk. We'll get to your background a little later and how that relates to some of the people who are on the line here. But let's talk about your vision for public charter school families. There's so many who are on the line today on this webinar. What's your education vision for the city, and how do public charter schools fit into that educational vision?
So charter schools are at the core of this from the following standpoint. As I've outlined, education is what got me here. Today, the educational system is not working for our children. It shouldn't be the case that I can randomly take 10 Black and brown boys or girls in the 4th grade and 2, maybe 3 can read. It should not be the case that between 3rd grade and 8th grade, I take that entire spectrum, that 70+% of our children are below proficient. It is not working. As mayor, I'll completely transform the city's commitment to our kids. I'll give meaning to the phrase cradle to career rather than arbitrary pre-K to 12. And so education is the way out. And I'll make certain that as it comes to public charters, they fit in. I want the best district schools. I want the best magnet schools. I want the best parochial schools. And I want the best charter schools. Our child's life should not be turned by their zip code. And today they are. So I want to make certain that yes, charters are included. And yes, I want the best charters.
You've said publicly in the past that you support lifting the charter cap. Can you explain why that is? It's obviously something that's of great importance to these families because there are, of course, some school networks and schools that are ready to welcome students in, but they can't because of the cap on charters.
So the answer is, given the number of children whom we have on the waiting list, and looking at the impact or the success or lack thereof of educating our children in New York City schools, we need to make certain that we go to the best education. So yes, I would lift the charter caps. The waiting list is way too long. And so for those who are on the waiting list, they ought to have the opportunity to make certain that they get the same quality education. Right now, that's not happening.
Here's a question from a parent in Queens. Pre-K has been Mayor Bill de Blasio's signature achievement. How would you improve it and put your stamp on it? Currently, charters are blocked from providing 3K and receive a fraction of the per pupil funding that the DOE spends and requires DOE approval for any pre-K class they want to offer. How would you work with Albany to make that law more equitable? That is a parent who is in the know.
So let me just give you this. There are currently, 3 applications for every charter seat in Harlem and the South Bronx. We need to lift the cap immediately so that every neighborhood has a choice of good schools. The money should go with the child, or it's really not a choice. And so I want to make certain that in addition to that, pre-K, by the time many of our kids get to pre-K, they're already behind. And so I want to make certain that I start earlier than that. And that is, we need affordable child care for all, especially the youngest New Yorkers. I know that the Child Care Act has now gone into, it will now be part of this federal stimulus package. We need to focus on that, but we need to get the children before pre-K. I want affordable child care. I want to make certain that we have the right educators who can assess our children. All of our children are gifted and talented. Some start slower than others. Let's identify if there are those who have special needs. Let's get to them early and intervene. And let's make certain that our children, by the time they get to pre-K, they're already online. And then I want to make certain in my plan that every child in New York City can read by the end of the 3rd grade. Why is that? Because all the educators tell us that between 0 and the end of the 3rd grade, our children are learning to read. After that, they're reading to learning. We've lost far too many of them. I want to invest early in our children. No child leaves the end of the 3rd grade without being able to read and do math. No child.
Specifically to the question that was asked, I'm wondering if you would end the practice of requiring DOE approval for those pre-K classes they want to offer. Are you trying to get rid of any of the barriers to be able to expand what for some families is a really important option in terms of early childhood education and also childcare?
I'd want to make sure that we expand it. I don't want to extend the ban. I want to make sure that our children get the education by whatever means necessary. So if there's some artificial barriers in place, I'd eliminate those barriers to make sure that our children get the education and the kind of support that they needed early, which is why I'm going for affordable childcare. I'm going before we get to pre-K. So whatever obstacles exist, I would eliminate those obstacles or try to do whatever I can to eliminate them, certainly reduce them.
Let's talk about equity right now. The school system is probably one of the most segregated in the country. A parent in the Bronx wants to know how you're going to focus on inequity and also being able to make schools more diverse. So for so many students, that requires being bused and taking trains out of their neighborhoods. How do you end that cycle?
This started in, let's go through the histories. 67 years ago, the same time we had Brown versus Board of Education, we had Levittown, which is maybe an hour and a half away from here, where the federal government outlined the supportive housing, which was in fact redlined. The same reason, the reason that Charlie Helm in Houston and Thurgood Marshall did not go after segregated neighborhoods and instead went after segregated schools is because they thought that was a path that could get the most support. If we look today at the segregation that's taking place, we cannot mathematically integrate. But what we can do is intentionally make certain that the best quality education gets to every zip code. In instances where we can integrate, we should integrate. It's really difficult to begin to integrate, especially at the early ages. So the best way forward is to transform what is now a system that doesn't work for many of our Black and brown kids because of their zip codes. So I would transform that, integrate where we could, but make sure they had the best quality education along the lines I've talked about in district, magnet, charter, as well as parochial.
Let's talk a little bit about an issue that's not education, but it's a parent question, specifically about their neighborhood in East New York, rise of garbage on the streets, obviously an issue that any mayor would have to deal with in terms of sanitation. What is a timeline for cleaner streets look like for you? Obviously, it's been an issue during the pandemic that has been remedied a little bit. Sanitation was moved to nighttime pickup, but how do you make the streets cleaner?
It is a question that every day when I visit New Yorkers, as I've done every single day, I was out in different parts of New York today. And listen, I've signed a quality of life pact with the residents of New York. As mayor, I will ensure that recycling, pace and recycling pickup will run on time and never miss a collection. Additionally, private hauling, we should revisit so that the commercial waste is also handled, especially in neighborhoods in the South Bronx and North Brooklyn and Jamaica, Queens. These have been historically impacted by commercial waste industry. And so we need to focus and continue to make sure that we address that. We got to clean the streets. We got to make them safe and we got to make them clean. And that will be the highest priority because that's the experience that we all expect in New York City. You can't have safe streets and you don't have clean streets. That impacts the experience that we have in each of our neighborhoods. That's got to be the highest priority.
Let's talk about some other educational issues. One thing we were discussing before you jumped on here was specific to in the conversation about picking the best schools for your children was a conversation about where to send your kids to school. And the number one thing is to be able to have choice. And let's talk about the specialized high school test. It's something that will undoubtedly be something that you'll have to, you'll play a major role in as mayor if you were to be elected. Let's talk more about that. Where do you stand on the test? Should the test be scrapped? What is your plan to deal with this? Because it's a huge issue in terms of segregation in schools in New York.
So the way I look at this is I'm troubled by the number of Black and brown students who are not in the specialized high schools. And what I have cited in every form is that there, outside of Japan, there's not one great educational institution that relies solely on one test, not one. From Beta to Tsinghua to Caltech to MIT, not one of them. So we need to, I'm okay with keeping the test, but that is just one criteria. We need to expand the criteria and we know it can be done. If I just cite my alma mater and I cite it out with humility, but if I cite that, they had the lowest acceptance rate, which meant it's the most competitive year, and they had the highest level of diversity in the history of the school. So we know it can be done. And I will announce a specialized high school test prep program beginning in the 5th grade. That's going to take place in middle schools that have seen low rates of specialized high school admissions. Every student in these schools is going to be eligible as long as they participate on a regular basis with all classes. Testing materials, books will be free. This will eliminate the cost of test prep, which is a barrier, which is a given that we know the students in specialized high schools disproportionately come from higher income communities. I'll also create mentorship programs. In addition, part of my infrastructure plan, I'm going to make certain that I have broadband to every home. So I'm okay with seeing that you keep the test, but we need to expand the criteria. And for many children who are unaccepted in the specialized high schools, the decision, you know, by in the third grade, they've already fallen behind is reading and math. That's why I'm saying that my reading and math, I stipulate that every child in New York City, it can read and do math by the end of the third grade. Not one child leaves. Our children are learning to read between 0 and the third grade. After that, they're reading to learn. We've lost far too many. And I would make certain, therefore, that they'd be prepared to the extent that we kept the specialized.
Got it. Let's go to a question now from a parent, Stacy Gautier, who says, "I hope you." What she wants to know is how we would work with the unions, and I'd imagine she's meaning the teachers' union here. Mm-hmm. There's no systemic district change without it, and this change will impact New York City education as a whole. How do you work with the unions to be able to affect the schools within the city? Obviously, union contracts are very important, but specifically with the teachers' union here.
So listen, it's very important to work with the unions. They do represent the teachers, but I want to be very clear about this. I'm in this for the students. I want to fight for the students. And right now, what's taking place with our children should be an outrage. We can't simply have 3rd through 8th grade children who are reading 70% below proficient. It costs us $26,000 to educate a child in New York City and $446,000 to keep an inmate in Rikers. What are we doing here? Where are our priorities? 80% of the people in Rikers don't have a GED. If I take 18 to 24 population at Rikers Island, 1/3 read at the 5th grade level. This is a complete unmitigated disaster. We're in the middle of a crisis. What are we doing? I got to go fight for those children. I will work with anyone who's got the same agenda as I do. Those children are me. I wouldn't be here without education. We ought at some point just acknowledge the fact that we're not getting our children educated the way they should be.
Let's talk more about your educational journey. It's one that I'm sure that some parents it's a journey that I think that mirrors what a lot of parents would love to hear. Right? Had the opportunity to have choice, be able to go to a school outside of the community, and then be able to go to college and get a master's degree, and then go up to the highest levels of the business world. How do you envision being able to create education policies that allow families to be able to have that kind of access?
That's what this is all about. That's why I decided to run for mayor, because we don't have that access. This is all about giving our children the opportunity. I wouldn't be here without education. Like many of the single mothers out there, I understand the sacrifices my mother had to make, 3 jobs, then becoming a social worker, knowing what it's like not to have, knowing what it's like to have to wash tin foil. I know what it's like not to have. And I know but for education, I wouldn't be here. Starting in the 6th grade, teacher says, Mrs. McGuire, he's got some talent here. There's a school in the suburbs. She said, we can't pay for it. So I got a scholarship and financial aid. So we had to borrow whatever we could for me to get that education. And I was there until I got the question of, can you go compete against the best? And left home by myself at 16 years old to go compete against the best. And was able to do okay there. And then was fortunate to get a scholarship to go to Harvard. It shouldn't be random. It's got to be systemic. And right now, what is systemic is our children don't have that opportunity. And we got to fight for this opportunity. It was scholarship and financial aid that got me to high school and then on to college. We got to have pathways for our children to get there. Give them the basics. Give them the basics. My Cradle to Career does just that. I want what all of our parents want for our children. Give us the basics and give us the opportunity. It can be vocational training. It can be traditional training. It doesn't matter, but give me the opportunity, give me the basics. And right now, that's not happening. We're failing our children. I wouldn't be here without that. I keep coming back to that. That's what I want for our children. We don't have that. We're going backwards, and we continue to go backwards. We've gone backwards for the past several years, and our children have suffered. And then when COVID hit us, and I got no broadband, I got no tablet, I got no access, I'm out of school, and I'm on whatever device I can get if it works. and the teacher doesn't know I'm there. And I can buffer because I know how to do that. I may be playing Minecraft for 2K, and who knows? And I may or may not be able to read, and who knows? Because the teacher can't go to 25 to 30 homes. Who knows how well I'm doing? And oh, by the way, the impact it had on the mothers who had to quit their jobs to stay at home with their children, especially Black and brown women who had to do that, is significant. And who's taking it? Who's looking at this? Who cares? I do.
Let's talk about an issue that of course affects everybody who's on this webinar. Given what's going on in the city, do you have a plan to mitigate gun violence in the city? There's been an increase in shootings. Shootings are up over 30% so far this year. What's your plan on the public safety element of everything?
Listen, safety is key. That's the covenant that we have with New Yorkers, but we've just talked about why we find ourselves in the position that we're finding. We find ourselves, we are not investing in our communities. I got no rims or nets on the backboard. I got no summer job. I got no community center. I got no tablet. I got no broadband. And I live in a pretty crowded condition. And my crew, some of my boys just got the newest Jordans and I can't afford them. What do you think I'm going to do? What do I have? And so I need to make the streets safe. I need to start investing today in our communities to prevent this. I need to get over just policing. More police is not going to solve what I've just described as a fundamental issue that we need to address. We got to invest. I got to invest in summer jobs. I got to invest in community centers. We have to give our children options and opportunities and show them that there's a world of possibility that includes them. And right now we're not doing that. So yes, you got to make the streets clean. We got to make them safe. We got to get the guns off the street, which is what I have. I need to make certain I got the right police to do this. Going back to the Giuliani stop and frisk years is not the right way. We got to come up with a different alternative, which I have. Community policing, invest in the community, invest in the cure of violence, returning to making certain that the police are held accountable, going against the I-95 iron pipeline, making certain that we know who the gun manufacturers are and maybe they microcode so they can't wipe the guns off to make them illegal. We can do things like this. We can make certain that those who repeat offenders get remanded. Those who are convicted for felony who are caught with a loaded gun get remanded, put back in jail. We need to do whatever we can to get these guns off the street, but we also need to make certain, we need to make certain that we're investing in our communities so that our children don't get seduced into that world.
So let's go back to some education questions while we still have you, and we'll try to keep these questions brief so that we can get as many as we can in.
Sure.
Just in terms of we learned today that that students will be going back for full in-person learning. Obviously, it was announced by the mayor today, but the final word actually obviously sits with the governor because of the way that mayoral control of schools work. What is your plan to support this effort when it comes to full in-person learning? And if that is your plan, and just talk about it from a perspective of public schools and public charter schools.
It is. Listen, this is welcome news, but the lack of a clear plan does nothing to reassure our parents, mostly Black and brown, who have serious and valid concerns about the city's ability to protect their children from the virus. Additionally, this announcement doesn't do anything to reverse the lost learning opportunities that have already affected for 2 school years at least. So I call on the city to implement a year-round summer instruction for all students. Parents have the ability to opt out in March. And in the time since the mayor has squandered our ability to ramp up summer instruction, currently planning for only 190,000 seats. It's going to have a disastrous effect again for students of color who are already facing significant losses over the summer. Lack of access to broadband and computers for distant learning. Who's going to benefit most from in-person instruction? Also is going to have the greatest doubts. That's what we're experiencing now. We need to consult with the parents first, which we haven't done. They need to be confident about the city's ability to keep the children safe and to provide quality education to make up for the year that we've lost. And we need to go further. So I'm going to make certain that the teachers are taken care of. The mayor also needs to make sure we're communicating directly and clearly what that instruction work looks like. And we need to make certain that we take care and have the appropriate services for the mental health challenges. You know, the state.
Let's talk about charter funding for a moment here. And do you believe that charter schools, should charter schools receive the same funding as district schools from the DOE for programs for high-risk students? And should students have the same access to programs at public charter schools as they do at the district schools? A lot of that has to do with the funding perspective.
The answer is the money should go with the child. It's not really a choice. So the funding should go with the child. Right now, the application for every charter in the South Bronx is, you know, for every seat, and it's 3 times. 3 applications. We need to lift the cap so that every neighborhood has a choice of good schools.
Well, let's talk about the sort of individualized education perspective and ensuring that education is more tailored to students' individual needs, and how it impacts active learners, right? You know, I think the parent who's asking this question is specifically talking about ways that students can feel a bit of ownership over their educational journey. It's been a tough year, and a lot of these students are learning remotely or the mix of in-person and remote. How do you ensure parents and students that they can have some ownership over their educational journey and their educational path?
Well, I'm not quite certain how you're describing that, but my plan is this is for IEP. Is that what you're describing, or
it's about ensuring that education is tailored to specific students' needs? Some may say it's about class size, others may say it's about opportunities in terms of types of schools they can go to. So it's rather open-ended.
So the answer is, as I've said before, we need to make sure that parents are actively involved in the choice of education for their children, which is why I want to start early, before pre-K. Let's identify those who are on schedule and those who need some support. We need that, and I want to do that early. I don't want to wait. And so, yes, we need to have the parents more involved. As I said, there's a triangle here that we need to focus on. It is the child, it's the parent, and it's the teacher. And that triangle needs to be as tight as it can get, because whenever any one of them is not working in sync with the other, the child is gonna suffer. We need to make sure that we've invested that way, but I'm fighting for the children. I want to be clear. I'm fighting for these children who are me. So yes, we need to make sure that we have appropriate customized education depending upon where our children are. Parents need
as we close out
input.
Here, tell me what your favorite subject was in school and why.
So I like both. I like math and English.
I'd imagine you'd like math, right? You work in finance.
Well, I like math, but you know, when I started out in college, I majored in English and American literature. So I love words. I love, you know, Langston Hughes and Ralph Ellison and James Baldwin, because they made me, you know, they gave me the energy, they gave me the insights into how I should conduct myself. W.B. Du Bois did and Douglas did, right? So that living in that world of literature was so important. But in the world of finance, which is part of my plan to make sure that in the 6th grade, every child is both digitally and financially literate in a world of technology and finance, in order for us to move forward, we need to have that skill set. I'm going to focus on making certain that our children can read and write and do math and have the technological proficiency. That's in the 8th grade. I want to make sure that they get exposed to the different career opportunities, vocational training, they get a summer job, that they continue with that vocational training as well as traditional training, and a summer job that takes them from 8th grade to 12th grade. By the time they graduate, they do 1 of 3 things. They go to that career job to which they've been exposed, paid summer job, a 2-year, 4-year college, but they will have the skill set to go into the world and participate and contribute.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for sharing your vision with the parents who are on this webinar tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to bring Rich Bury up now, and we'll chat in just a second. So there we go. Let's see.
I think we're all here, Miles.
There you go. All right. Very lively discussion with Ray McGuire. Let's just try to, key takeaways from what he said.
Well, I think I appreciated, in some way, that was similar to a version of the story that we heard from Natasha and Leslie, that so much of this for him is about his own life journey. And I think in some way or the other, all of us spoke about how education provided a pathway to the possible in a way that wouldn't have felt possible otherwise. I know I feel that very, very acutely in my own life. I know that other folks have said the same. And so that's what really I find most inspiring about his story, is just his life journey and why that animates his passion. It comes across when he speaks, Mr. McGuire's passion for education. So that's really what resonated with me most.
Leslie?
Sure, and I'll be brief because I see we have another candidate joining us.
Cool.
I think what stands out most to me is sort of, and I want to acknowledge all the parents who are asking questions in the chat, that there are real serious concerns around how do we make our education more accessible for our students, particularly students with special needs and students with disabilities. It's not just a matter of funding and questions about charter school equalization, but what does that look like and how can we use those funds to decrease class sizes? And real questions about safety and public safety, not just in our neighborhoods, but in school safety agents in buildings. And so just want to acknowledge all of the parents who are asking great questions in the chat. And I'm excited to hold more candidates to the fire and answering and being accountable to our community.
Right. Well, let's do that. There we go. Andrew Yang has entered the room. Andrew, I'll introduce you and then, let you say a little bit. But Andrew Yang moved to New York City 25 years ago and came of age, fell in love, and became a father here. Seeing our city the way it is breaks his heart, his campaign says, and what we do in the coming months will determine our city's trajectory for decades. He's running for mayor because his campaign says he sees a crisis and believes he can help. I want to welcome in Andrew Yang.
Hey, Miles, how are you? Hello, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Andrew, this is a webinar that has public charter school families on it and supporters on it. And so a lot of the questions will focus on that specifically. Let's talk about what your educational vision is for the city and how do public charters fit in that spectrum.
Thanks, Miles. I want to shout out Rich Bury for everything he's done. Congratulations, Rich. You touched so many lives. Some families here, I'm sure, feel the same way. My vision is an educational system that's delivering value for us and our families. And I say this as a public school parent myself. I have two boys who are 8 and 5. One of them, the older, is autistic, has had IEPs the whole time. We have him in a special needs school. And then the younger is in a public school kindergarten. And I know that the first move that most all of us have when we have children is to find a public school that is working for our kids. And then if you don't feel like your public school is a great option, then you'll move heaven and earth to try and find another option. And I believe that's one of the reasons why charter schools have stepped in and become such an important provider of quality educations to so many kids here in New York City. So I want to build on success. Anything that's working for our kids, we need more of. Anything that's not working for our kids, we should be doing less of. I know that some of the charter schools have done an incredible job of delivering remote learning over this last period of time. It seems at a higher level than a lot of other types of schools. But I think kids belong in school in the classroom. I just think they learn better. And school's about more than schoolwork. It's about socialization, which my kids need very badly. My kids are kind of, let's say, socially immature would be like one way of putting it. So socialization, extracurriculars, athletics, like everything goes into a healthy child, well-educated child. So I want our kids back in school, and I think that's going to be better for them, better for families. But I want to build on success. I want to leaders lead. I think principals should be able to decide what's going on in their building. And I think that's the way that we can add the most value to our kids. I want the resources to be around our kids.
You've donated money to help charter schools across the city open. As mayor, you'd have a direct funding source in the DOE to help charters, whether it get that funding, but also to raise the charter cap. So where do you stand on the charter cap, and where do you stand on DOE funding going to charter schools?
I want to augment what's working in our city. And if there's a charter school that's delivering results for our kids, and that network wants to deliver results for more kids, we should be helping. And that can include reactivating some of, as you all know, the zombie charters that are unused right now. That's my first move, is to try and get those already authorized charters used, and then we can figure out what the next steps are. But I want to build on whatever's working for our kids, and will do everything in my power to channel resources in that direction. And that includes DOE funding as well. I think that the politics that have plagued charters, it's really counterproductive and even immoral, in my opinion. That to me, I don't care what the funding source of a school is or what the capital structure is. I just care about what's going on with our children. You know, and the fact that charter schools have become a politicized punching bag really troubles me, because if you look at it, like why are they targeted in the way that they are? It's simply because some folks feel like it's going to somehow be like like threatening over time. And to me, just focus on the kids and what's working. So that gives you a sense of how I'd want to allocate resources, and my views on the charter cap over time.
Today, the mayor announced that schools would be open for in-person learning starting September 13th. Your thoughts on that? And does that plan make sense to you? Should it be sooner? How do you feel about all of that?
Well, it's been a terrible year for our kids, and certainly, you know, my boys regressed significantly earlier in the year. So I'm thrilled that we're having this Summer Rising hybrid summer camp and summer school for kids. And I think that having kids back in school this fall is the right vision. And I'm glad that the mayor's leading in that direction. A lot of kids are going to show up. This may be less true in the schools that you all have your children in, but a lot of kids are going to show up way behind, and not just with learning loss, but in some cases neglected, abused, or traumatized. And I think that having kids back in school is going to give us a chance to assess what our kids need, and hopefully deliver it in terms of having mental health resources, guidance counselors. I'm thrilled that 500 social workers are being deployed through the school system, because I think that's the kind of step we're going to need to take, unfortunately.
Before we get on to the other questions asked by the parents, you said that your boys had regressed. Just talk about that. I mean, from being a parent of two kids who are in school now, what have you noticed?
So first, they were not excited to go back to school. And one of the things that I find troubling about this time is when people say that their kids are thriving through remote learning. It's like your kid saying they don't want to go to school and they enjoy online learning is not necessarily thriving in my view, because my kids don't want to go to school and they think online is better. But that's just because they, like prefer not leaving the house. So when I say my kids have regressed, my kids are real homebodies and not very social. And so there's something that's going on with us in our families. I don't know if you all feel this. It's like there's a certain kind of muscle memory that gets either developed or undeveloped. And so if you're going, I'm just use our own experience. If you're going to the office every day and you go to the office every day and then you get in that routine and it's fine and you develop certain capacities. And then if you don't go into the office for a while, then your like approach changes. And I think that's what's happening with our kids right now. So my kids' capacities have changed over the last year, and not in ways that I think are positive for them. So that's what I meant when I said regressed. I felt like their social skills in particular were moving backwards.
Let's talk about as we sort of move along here about the charter school sector and how it educates about 13% of the city students, and 38% of Black students go to New York City public schools. how 38% of Black New York City public school students in K and 1 are in charters. In 2019, New York City hit a cap for the number of charter schools that can exist in the city that has stymied the growth in schools. We talked a little bit about the charter cap, but this really lies within the state legislature. Why do you feel there's been this issue with raising the cap to date? And then what would you do if you are supportive of raising the cap, what would you do to get that moving forward?
Again, I just want to deliver for our children, and whatever that takes is where I want to lead. And so to me, if a community says to, let's call it a legislative body, hey, this is what we need and want, I have a hard time imagining the legislative body looking up and saying, well, no, you don't know what it is you need, or you don't know how to best serve families. So that would be what I believe would be the dynamic. But I just want to deliver for kids and families at as high a level as we can. And the truth is, we don't have that much time. I mean, our city is in bad shape. Like, our kids need more. There are so many.
Is that like a first priority thing for you to go to Albany and say raise the charter cap? And if you do
again,
that,
I think the first step is to use the already allocated charters, and then if we get through that, then we can take the next steps. But I want to deliver for kids and families, and that should be not just our main. In my mind, it's the overriding priority, and so this is something I believe strongly in. And I have children who are obviously part of the system, and I would want my mayor to try and deliver for them, like whatever that they thought was going to help. So that's my vantage point on it.
Let's talk about an issue that affects a lot of charter schools. This is a question from a parent in Brooklyn, specifically about city school buildings and city buildings that are sitting vacant while they say charter schools remain locked out of those spaces. As mayor, how would you make those much needed classroom spaces available for charter systems in the city?
Thank you for this question. I would change this. It is shameful what is happening to charter schools in terms of being shunted to trailers, to spaces that are not serving our kids. Why? Because the city is not supporting you as equals, as just schools that are trying to educate our children in a way that families often are very excited about. So this is one thing I will commit to, is that you will be treated like any other school, and we have the facilities, as this questionnaire is indicating. We have now the space. You should not be in trailers. You should not be shunted aside. And when I say trailers, it's specifically like a friend of mine started a charter school, and they were in trailers, and they made the best of it. It was actually very adaptive and heroic, but it shouldn't have been necessary.
I started in a trailer too. Yeah.
So you get it's wrong. It's like, what is going on? Especially if you have the space. And this is one of the things that I would be angry about. I am clearly, as you can tell, angry about it. Just that our city's resources are for us to serve families. And then you have decision makers who are relegating certain schools as like second-class citizens, and it's manifesting in the kind of space your kids are learning in. It's wrong. So I will change this. You will be treated as other schools, and you will get the space that any other school would get. I would love to do this. It would give me a lot of pleasure, as you can tell.
You're very fired up about it. Let's talk about the news that came out earlier this month about the standard about the specialized high school exam, how only 8 Black students were admitted to Stuyvesant. Is this a problem? Do you see this as a problem? And how would you address it? I know you've talked a lot about de-emphasizing the test, but the test does still exist, and it is something that is necessary to get into, some of the most selective schools.
I do see this as a problem. Our selective high schools should better reflect the city, the composition of our community. And so here's how we're going to change it. I would open 2 new selective high schools in every borough. Now, why every borough? Because right now you have kids who are commuting an hour or more each way just to get to school across the city. And that doesn't make any sense to me. It also doesn't make sense to me that you have a million kids and demand for these selective high schools and you're not opening new ones. So let's open 2 new selective high schools per borough, and then let's modify the admissions process so that it includes the SHSAT, but also includes grades, essays, teacher recommendations, interviews, neighborhood, or like where you're coming from. And then let's have schools that reflect our beautiful city. So I do think it's a problem that only 8 Black students were admitted to Stuyvesant. I think we need to expand the supply of slots in selective high schools in a way that actually brings schools to you, or at least closer to you, maybe not in your front yard, but at least in your borough. And then build on what we have. I think we can do this in a way that serves everyone. One of the things I do want to avoid is this unfortunate racialized zero-sum game that, that's just not right for New York City. Why not just expand the slots and have a process that actually reflects what our kids hopefully will be going through just several years later when they apply to college? Because it's not like college has one data point. One data point does not strike me as a measurement of a child. I'm a parent. Can you look at a child and be like, you're 76? That doesn't make sense to me. We have much more information about our kids. Our teachers know our kids better than anyone but us.
A lot of the conversation is focused on scrapping the test. Where do you stand on that point? It's something that has become sort of a real weighty political issue.
Well, I think we can accomplish our goals by changing the process, making it more holistic. But I don't think getting rid of the test entirely is the right approach, in part because, again, our kids are going to be going through a process several years later for college that I think we can reflect with this high school admissions process.
How do you fix the segregation issue in schools, right? It's something that you see as a pervasive issue in New York, but something you'd have to tackle as mayor.
Yes, our schools are segregated in historically record levels. It's not great. And so the first thing we have to do is invest directly in our schools, and then hopefully build on some of the pilot programs that have helped diversify schools in Brooklyn and other neighborhoods. And as we were just discussing, see to it that certain schools are more diverse and representative of our city. There's a lot of progress to be made, but we should start at every level, really. We can tackle primary schools, intermediate schools, and certainly the high schools.
There's a question here from a parent about raising teacher salaries and strengthening teacher participation. Where do you stand on that issue?
I want to invest resources closer to our kids. And so I like the idea of elevated teacher comp, particularly in an industry where, as you all know, burnout is very real. Turnover is real. People are leaving the profession. I think higher compensation can help. I want principals to be able to lead as they see fit. And so I think if a principal sees that a teacher is doing great work, there should be ways to reward that teacher. And so I would be supportive. Anything that helps surround our kids with what they need. As you can tell probably from the tone of my answer, it's the things I'm not as interested in are things outside the building. If it's outside the building, the odds of it helping our children go down.
I think in talking about the SHSAT, I think a lot of times there is a bit of obfuscation here, but people who are in the know that only 3 of the specialized high schools actually require that test. What would you do as mayor? You'd be able to immediately change the admission requirements at Lehman, at Brooklyn Latin, at Staten Island Tech, at the other schools that don't. Only Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech require that test. Is that something you would try to get done, considering that test is not a requirement under the legal realm and under the statute?
I think there are adjustments that can be made immediately. Yes, it is a goal for me that our schools reflect our city, and that would include some of the high schools you just named.
And what do you make of the fact that the city has never tried to change that admission criteria at 5 of the schools they actually control?
Oh, well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Miles, where, attention tends to go to certain areas. I will say that despite the fact that we're discussing the selective high schools, like I want to help as many kids as possible, and the action in many ways is before people are in position to apply to these schools, or for families that, it's not going to be a fit for. So I'm very, very interested in investing in technical, apprenticeship, vocational training, anything that connects people to employers. I think real employment experience during high school is a game changer for a lot of people. The reality is, a lot of kids show up to school and just don't feel like it's that relevant to them, and we have to try and serve them too. So I agree with you that we tend to be focused on a handful of schools, which again, like my wife went to Stuyvesant, I get the attention, but we have to, I'm driven by trying to help as many kids get what they need as possible. But I'm with you. It's a bit of a mystery why no one's talked about the things that the city could do straightforwardly.
Let's talk a little bit about mayoral control of schools, right? That's going to be something that you would if you wanted full control, you'd have to find some friends in Albany who would get it done for you. Given that all decisions about schools, you have to get the sign off from Albany. Where do you stand on mayoral control of schools, and what do you want to do about it?
I am very pro mayoral control of schools. I mean, schools are such a key success factor for a city and for our families. And I was just endorsed today by State Senator John Liu, and have now developed a number of relationships in Albany with legislators that will be able to help us deliver for the people of New York City. My job is to deliver for you, and relationships in Albany help a lot on that score. So you will see zero political posturing from me relative to the folks at Albany. I just want to get things done. But I think mayoral control is a fantastic asset for our city.
Let's talk to the families who are on this webinar about your journey. You went to Brown and Columbia Law, but where did you start? Where did you go to? What kind of schools did you go to as a child?
Sure. I'd be very happy to. So my parents are immigrants from Taiwan. They met in graduate school and college out west at Berkeley. Maybe one reason why people, people say I have like a California vibe. I don't know if that's true. But they met in grad school in California. My father grew up on a peanut farm in Asia with no floor. I went and saw that farm years later. I was like, wow, Dad, you came really far. So I was born in Schenectady, New York, upstate, and then grew up in Westchester, not far from here. One of the only Asian kids in my school, a lot of Italian kids. And so I grew up kind of the odd man out, the odd kid out. I'd also skipped a grade, so I was extra small. As you can kind of imagine that picture. And always felt so grateful to be here in America, having, grown up the child of immigrants. And my parents emphasized education. And so I tried to do well in school, came here to New York, became...
Well, let's not skip. How did you wind up going to Exeter?
Oh yeah, that's sure, Miles. So I was in my so I went to public school from
because I think that sort of mirrors a lot of the parents, is like they think about the prep schools, and you got programs like Prep for Prep that a lot of people who are in this space wind up going to.
Thank you for bringing me back, Miles. You are right. Okay, so the grade I skipped was kindergarten. So that entire everything I needed to know I learned in kindergarten. I skipped kindergarten. It's one of the problems. And then I went to 1st to 10th grade at my local public school, which was fine, but wasn't really giving me what on some level I thought I needed. And then when my brother went off to college, I had a bit of a loneliness competitive thing. And so I went to my parents, and I'd gone to a summer academic program, and a girl in that summer academic program went to a school called Exeter and said she liked it. And so I went to my parents and said, hey, how about my going away to a school called Exeter? And part of it was driven by the fact that I was, the only Asian kid in my grade and one of the only non-white kids in the school. And I thought if I went to another school, it'd be a little bit more diverse and intellectually stimulating. And so I went to this private school starting in 11th grade, Phillips Exeter Academy. And it was a very tough adjustment. I showed up there as a 15-year-old and did not like it. But I had decided to go there myself. And so I was like, okay, let's make the best of this thing. So like
you seem to have made the best of it. Brown and Columbia, and the rest is history.
That's nice of you, Miles. So yeah, like, and I still do have friends from Exeter. I mean, it was a difficult experience. Maybe there's something that some of your kids relate to too. Like Exeter was a very, very difficult educational experience. It's very high pressure, but it builds you into something you would not have been otherwise. Like I 100% would not be running for mayor right now if I had not gone to that high school.
Yeah, I think us public charter people sort of definitely get that experience. But then on top of that, a lot of kids at the school I went to did the summer program at Exeter, and it's what got them prepared for the high stakes world of college prep and all of that. We are all done with time here, and so I'm going to say thank you for all of your comments. But before you go, what's the book you loved the most in school? I think I always want to know, what book was your coming of age, like high school favorite book?
So I don't know if this marks me in a particular way, but the first book that comes to mind for me was Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. I don't know what that says about me, but like that book did have an impact on me in 10th grade. So grateful to be here with you all.
Does that mean that Holden Caulfield is your favorite character?
Like Holden Caulfield, yeah, Holden Caulfield. Again, I mean, like I feel like I don't know if people still love Catcher in the Rye, but like I loved it at the time. Like reminiscing about Exeter Summer School, like the impact it had on various people. Miles, it's true. It's like there's like a rigor to, and I believe that a lot of the charter schools, that your kids go to like resemble this. But there's like a rigor and discipline and vision that these schools can impart on you, and it really does change your life. Like I'm a product of that. I'm like the son of immigrants. No one in my household was like, you're gonna be mayor someday, you know what I mean? Like that wasn't So to the extent that I have any sense of possibility, it really was my high school more than anything else. We need to deliver that for more of our kids.
Thank you, Andrew. And his favorite character, it seems, is Holden Caulfield, who of course was the icon of teenage rebellion and angst. So very interesting. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, Miles. And thank you, Rich, for universal pre-K. Like I'm one of the families that benefited.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, we're going to bring back in.
Everyone, have
Rich
a great rest of your
Natasha.
night. Appreciate you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's bring the panel back in to discuss. That was a pretty lively discussion, I think. We hit on a lot of topics. I think there was obviously a focus on the specialized high school test too. I think it's something he's been talking about a lot, and it's actually, and then also about school buildings as well. So yeah, what did you guys take away from it?
I thought the points made about space were absolutely the right ones, and it was nice to hear him put it so bluntly that like at times it can feel like some schools are relegated to second-class citizenship just based on the space that is allocated, or if a charter school is trying to bring up that the space is inadequate, that's the process seems laborious and too much red tape to try to fix that. I just thought that was spot on, and his points there were made well and pretty bluntly.
Rich?
Well, similarly, I mean, it was an interesting conversation, certainly. I don't always agree with everything. I personally have a different perspective on the specialized high schools in particular. I just believe fundamentally the process of sorting students through a single high stakes test in that way is not only poor educational practice, because it's just not a good way to sort students. It also feeds into the dynamic of scarcity, which is at the center of so much of the challenges in public education in New York City and places like it. But I appreciate, but again, I think obviously there are all issues that people can disagree with. Part of what I appreciate is his ability to just be forthright and say what he thinks. I do often believe that he is not sort of, he's not trying to track a particular political, I'm supposed to say, but he's telling you what he feels, which I really appreciate in a leader. You don't have to agree with everything. Just want to make sure that you're sort of speaking from the heart and from experience.
I think two things stood out for me tonight. The first is that for every single one of the candidates that we saw, Commissioner Garcia, Mr. McGuire, Mr. Yang, every single one of them has a connection to an independent school. For Commissioner Garcia, she sent one of her kids to independent school, and both Mr. McGuire and Mr. Yang went to pretty exclusive, expensive boarding schools in New England. And so I think it brings me back to how Rich started the conversation about why Achievement First exists and why all of us are on this call. We fundamentally believe that every single parent and every single kid deserves a choice to go to an excellent school. And there is something happening in New York City public schools where we feel like excellent schools don't exist currently in our neighborhoods. And that's why all of our schools exist, whether it's Democracy Prep, Achievement First, or Coney Island Prep. That's the first thing. I think the second thing that really stood out to me was how much power all of us have right now, particularly our parents and our families right now. I think for most days out of the year, for most times, the mayor isn't really looking or listening to ordinary citizens, at least in the ways that we want, or responding directly to your questions that you guys are putting in the chat. But for the next 5 weeks, every single one of these people, they want your vote, they want to hear from you, and they want to be anywhere on your ballot, whether it's 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1. And so I would just say for the next 5 weeks, the power really is in our parents and families' hands. And that's really exciting.
Yeah, I think that those are all good points. I mean, you brought up, a lot of I think Andrew Yang, what stuck out for me was the Exeter conversation, and the kids in my school who did Exeter summer program, it really benefited them, I think, for the most part. And so that was an interesting connection there. David?
Just the one point I'd make is just that we had 3 Democratic candidates speaking passionately about education, and all of them seem to be strong supporters of charter schools. And that's not always historically been the case with Democratic candidates. And so I was really pleased to hear that and pleased to hear from everyone. So that was my big takeaway.
That's a good point. It's like when did supporting all options become a non-political thing? It's something definitely that was interesting to hear. Thank you so much for everybody who joined us. Over 200 people who were on the webinar, for listening to the discussion about how to do ranked choice voting. I think it's sort of incredibly important as well. And so, I think the parents and the families who were on this definitely got sort of a really robust discussion about all the issues. Of course, we want to thank Rich Bury from Achievement First and Natasha Trivers from Democracy Prep, David Umansky from Civic Builders, of course, Leslie from Coney Island, and everybody else who joined. Thank you to Jackie for inviting me to do this, to be reconnected with my network of folks. And it was really great to have this kind of discussion. Important to have these kind of discussions as people are making. I mean, I think that because of the pandemic, we all, and all of these sort of Zoom forums, people are probably the most informed that they ever have been about any of the topics. Every night you can find if you like compost, you can find your compost. If you like, specific types of education, you can find you found that. And that's all coming to a head with Election Day coming up. So thank you for everybody who joined us tonight, and have a great night.
We also give a huge thank you to Narda, who held down the translation chat for all of our speaking families. So significant thank you to her. And I think most importantly, it's our parents. None of this is possible without them. They didn't come here to listen to us. They came here to answer your questions. So thank you to our parents and families, and our teachers and staff who joined too.
A thank you and apology to Narda. We try to speak slowly, and there's so much lively debate going on. So
And thank you to you, Miles. You make Bronx Prep proud. So thank you so much.
My people, of course. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.